every day we have to be prepared for war, not for defense. We're training warriors, not defenders. We fight wars to win, not to defend. Defense is something you do all the time. It's inherently reactionary and can lead to overuse, overreach, and mission creep. War is something you do sparingly, on our own terms, and with clear aims. We fight to win. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters. You kill people and break things for a living.
The U.S. military has officially changed its name from the Department of Defense to the Department of War, and the new proud self-declared War Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has boasted that he is ordering the U.S. military to stop following the laws of war, to ignore international law, and to carry out any crimes they deem necessary in order to maximize the lethality and the power of the U.S. empire. The mask on the U.S. empire has been taken off, showing its true face. Meanwhile, Donald Trump also stated that the U.S. military is going to be focused more on fighting the, quote, enemy within, end quote. He bragged about deploying the National Guard to U.S. cities like Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles and Portland, Oregon. And Trump boasted that the U.S. military, which, has waged war all around the world, is now going to bring those imperial wars back home and attack people inside the United States. And Trump even said that U.S. cities will be used as, quote, training grounds, end quote, for the U.S. military, for soldiers to prepare for waging war, which is what every empire has always done throughout history. After constantly attacking people around the world, the empire always comes home, and this is what we are now seeing in the United States.
While America is under invasion from within, we're under invasion from within. That's a war too. It's a war from within. And I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military. Oh, and we haven't even started yet. Last month, I signed an executive order to provide training for quick reaction force that can help quell civil disturbances. And this is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within.
This was announced at a special event on the 30th of September in the city of Quantico in Virginia. The Secretary of War ordered U.S. generals and admirals from all around the world to convene for this meeting where he officially announced the new policies of the U.S. military.
And welcome to the War Department, because the era of the Department of Defense is over. You see, the motto of my first platoon was, "Those who long for peace must prepare for war. To ensure peace, we must prepare for war." From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this: warfighting. Preparing for war and preparing to win. Unrelenting and uncompromising in that pursuit.
The U.S. War Secretary, Hegseth, then boasted that the U.S. military is the strongest, most lethal military on Earth.
As President Trump has said, and he's right, we have the strongest, most powerful, most lethal, and most prepared military on the planet. That is true, full stop. Nobody can touch us. It's not even close.
The U.S. War Secretary also repeated his favorite slogan. It's a very Orwellian slogan. War is peace. Well, his slogan is peace through strength. And he insisted that the U.S. empire is going to preserve peace by waging war around the world. And he said that we're in an urgent moment, and this is why the U.S. military needs many, many more weapons.
It's called peace through strength. And as history teaches us, the only people who actually deserve peace are those who are willing to wage war to defend it. Peace through strength brought to you by the warrior ethos, and we are restoring both. You see, this urgent moment, of course, requires more troops, more munitions, more drones, more Patriots, more submarines, more B-21 bombers. It requires more innovation, more AI in everything and ahead of the curve, more cyber effects, more counter-UAS, more space, more speed. America is the strongest, but we need to get stronger and quickly. The time is now, and the cause is urgent.
Now, much of the media coverage of Hegseth's speech focused on his attacks on so-called wokeism. He said that the U.S. military is no longer going to be woke. He attacked DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he essentially said that the U.S. military should be run by white men. Now, a lot of the media coverage also focused on the fact that Hegseth complained about fat generals and fat soldiers in the military, and he ordered them to lose weight. Now, of course, it goes without saying that this is extremely ironic coming from the war secretary in the Trump administration, led by an obese billionaire oligarch who eats McDonald's every day, and he had a McDonald's feast at the White House. It's very funny hearing his administration complain about fat people in the military. But regardless, I think a lot of this media coverage missed the forest for the trees. The most concerning part of Hegseth's speech did not get enough attention in the media, which is that he essentially proudly announced that he's ordering U.S. soldiers to carry out war crimes, to ignore international law, to ignore the Geneva Conventions, and to kill people and carry out any atrocities that they think are necessary to maximize the power of the U.S. empire. I already started by playing this clip, but I need to play it again because it's so important. Listen here to the Secretary of War order the U.S. military to ignore the rules of engagement, ignore international law, and carry out war crimes whenever they want.
Every day, we have to be prepared for war, not for defense. We're training warriors, not defenders. We fight wars to win, not to defend. Defense is something you do all the time. It's inherently reactionary and can lead to overuse, overreach, and mission creep. War is something you do sparingly, on our own terms, and with clear aims. We fight to win. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters.
The U.S. Secretary of War then proudly stated that the U.S. military kills people and breaks things for a living. Listen here.
You kill people and break things for a living.
What the U.S. Department of War is doing is it's now essentially publicly admitting that it doesn't care about international humanitarian law. It doesn't care about the Geneva Conventions, which were agreed to by the world in 1949 after the end of World War II, that there is a clear set of rules that establishes what countries around the world can do when they wage war. The U.S. empire is now saying it doesn't care. It's going to carry out war crimes ad nauseum. The U.S. empire is going to do whatever it wants in order to maximize its power and maximize its lethality, as Pete Hegseth proudly says. And in fact, this is something that Hegseth has been talking about for years. So who is Hegseth? Where does he come from? He was previously a host on Fox News, and Trump watches Fox News every day, and he liked this guy and said, hey, I should make him the head of the Pentagon. And by the way, back when Hegseth was working at Fox News, his own colleagues, these are ideological conservatives who were working at Fox News, they admitted that he was completely unqualified. He should not be running a military because he's a drunk. He was constantly drinking alcohol, and at work, his colleagues would smell the alcohol on his breath. This is the unrepentant warmonger who is now the head of the U.S. military, who renamed the Pentagon the War Department, and he's now ordering the U.S. military to ignore international law and carry out war crimes. Well, back in 2020, Trump carried out acts of war against Iran and Iraq. He killed Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, in an attack in January 2020 when he was visiting Iraq. And immediately after, Pete Hegseth went on Fox News, where he was working at the time, and he said that the US military needs to rewrite the rules of war in order to wage direct war on Iran. Of course, Hegseth is a lifelong neoconservative war hawk, and as you can hear here in this clip, Hegseth said very clearly that the US military should target hospitals and cultural sites. This is a clip from 5 years ago of the current head of the US military.
None of this, though, changes the calculation of this regime, which is an evil regime. They need to come back limping and begging. I happen to believe that we can't kick the can down the road any longer in trying to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. So what better time than now to say, we're starting the clock. You've got a week. You've got X amount of time before we start taking out your energy production facilities. We take out key infrastructure. We take out your missile sites. We take out nuclear developments.
That is
we
not
take out
a popular
capabilities. Or you know what, take out a Quds headquarters while you're at it if you want.
But what do you know about these cultural sites? Because we're not supposed to be hitting cultural sites, but I understand, I've been hearing that we believe that the Iranians are hiding missiles and weapons in some of these cultural sites, churches,
of course they do.
Mosques.
This is what Islamists do. It's what they've done on the battlefield against folks like me and my entire generation. Human shields, using mosques, using hospitals, schools. This is what our enemies do. If we're going to fight to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb, this regime, then we need to rewrite the rules that are advantageous to us.
Now, I have to emphasize that it is not at all an exaggeration to say that Pete Hegseth is an extremist, both a political extremist and a religious extremist. Back in 2020, when he was working at Fox News, he published an insane book called American Crusade, in which he proudly identified himself as a crusader in the religious sense. He said that the right wing in the US needs to retake up arms and continue the crusades launched over 1,000 years ago. And he proudly stated that the US right wing is waging a holy war. He used the term holy war against the international left, China, and Islam. Those are his targets, the international left, China, and Islam. By the way, there are 2 billion Muslims in the world, and China is a country of 1.4 billion people. So he's essentially declaring war on over 3 billion people. And by the way, Hegseth has crusader tattoos in Latin, like Deus Vult, this crusader tattoo that was used 1,000 years ago by the original crusaders. And in fact, in this crazy book, American Crusade, Hegseth called for overthrowing the government of China. This is the guy who's now the Secretary of War. In May, Hegseth took a trip to Singapore, where he attended an international summit in which he declared, quote, "We are preparing for war," end quote. And what country is the target of that US war? Of course, it is China. Listen to these clips in which the US War Secretary essentially admits in public that the US empire is preparing for war on China.
The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not, but it certainly could be. But beyond our borders and beyond our neighborhood, we are reorienting toward deterring aggression by communist China. Those who long for peace must prepare for war. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Now, if you go back to the speech that Hegseth delivered in Virginia in September, he made it very clear that the US military is targeting China and the Western Hemisphere. He said these are the so-called urgent threats. Listen here.
Likewise, the nature of the threats we face in our hemisphere and in deterring China.
Now, after Hegseth spoke at that event, Donald Trump also gave a speech, and he made similar remarks talking about the need for the U.S. empire to impose hegemony in the Western Hemisphere. Listen here.
Together with the leaders here today, we're also restoring a needed focus on defeating threats in the Western Hemisphere throughout this region.
And in particular, he threatened Venezuela and boasted about how the U.S. military has been bombing Venezuelan boats and killing dozens of Venezuelans without any evidence, without any trial, claiming that supposedly they're trafficking drugs. Although, again, there's no evidence of that. So the U.S. is at war with Venezuela. Listen here.
It's just like in Venezuela. You've seen the boats going. We can't find any more boats there. And we take them out. And we've taken out for. So if you try to poison our people, we will blow you out of existence, because that's the only language they really understand. That's why you don't see any more boats on the ocean. You don't see any boats. Around Venezuela, there's nothing.
Now, what's essentially happening here is the Trump administration is declaring that all of the Western Hemisphere is part of the U.S. empire's sphere of influence. So in this speech, he threatened Venezuela. He also said that Canada should become the 51st state.
And Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state, and you get it for free.
And of course, Trump wants to colonize Greenland against the will of the vast majority of the people who actually live there. So what the Trump administration is doing is bringing back the 200-year-old colonial Monroe Doctrine. This was declared back in 1823, and essentially the U.S. empire was telling the European empires, Latin America is part of the U.S. empire's sphere of influence. The U.S. was telling the Spanish and the Portuguese, we own Latin America. It's our imperial protectorate. This is a 200-year-old explicitly colonial doctrine, and Trump has been bringing it back. And in particular, the U.S. empire wants to colonize Venezuela. Trump is obsessed with trying to overthrow Venezuela's leftist government and its president, Nicolás Maduro. And of course, it's not a coincidence that Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, and Venezuela is a close ally of China and Russia and Cuba and Nicaragua. So the Trump administration is obsessed with overthrowing Venezuela. Trump already attempted a failed coup in Venezuela during his first term back in 2019, when he imposed the puppet Juan Guaido as the fake so-called president of Venezuela, despite the fact that Guaido had never participated in a presidential election. And then in 2020, there was a failed U.S.-backed invasion of Venezuela led by U.S. Army Special Operations Forces. And today, in 2025, the second Trump administration is launching yet another coup attempt in Venezuela and threatening direct U.S. military attacks on Venezuela. The New York Times has even reported, citing internal sources in the U.S. and also interviews with right-wing opposition oligarchic forces in Venezuela, that they are directly collaborating with the Trump administration, and in particular with Marco Rubio, who is a lifelong neoconservative war hawk, and they're preparing a U.S. attack to try to overthrow Maduro and take control of Venezuela. In fact, at a rally back in 2023, Trump admitted that he wanted to take over Venezuela and pillage its oil. I mean, this is just blatant neocolonialism. These were the remarks that Trump made 2 years ago.
Venezuela. How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door.
In this speech, Donald Trump also boasted that he has increased the U.S. military budget to over $1 trillion, which is just so insanely high that no other country on earth comes even remotely close.
I've committed to spending over $1 trillion on our military in 2026, and that's the most in the history of our country. $1 trillion, that's a lot of money. I hope you like that. Ma'ams and sirs, I hope you like it. That's a hell of a lot of money. We have the best of everything.
Now, Trump's speech was full of contradictions. He claimed that he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize, but he also bragged about bombing Iran and Venezuela.
Nobody's ever done that. Will you get the Nobel Prize? Absolutely not. They'll give it to some guy that didn't do a damn thing. They'll give it to a guy that wrote a book about the mind of Donald Trump and what it took to solve the wars. And he'll get the Nobel Prize will go to a writer. The Iran nuclear power, the Iran, all of the great power that we thought existed, we blew it out. By the way, the B-2 bombers were incredible. That is stealth. They went into that. I was with General Kane and Pete were in we call it the war room. But we're watching them go in, and they were totally untouched. They were not seen. They were literally not seen. They dropped their bombs. They hit every single one of them, hit its target. It was total obliteration.
And he boasted of forcing NATO allies to massively expand their military spending from 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP. And Trump emphasized that those NATO allies in Europe are spending hundreds of billions of dollars buying weapons from U.S. corporations in the military-industrial complex. So Trump boasted that U.S. corporations are profiting from war.
Now, as you know, I went over and I met with NATO, and NATO raised from 2 to 5, which everyone said 5% of GDP. Millions and now trillions of dollars are pouring in. They didn't pay the 2% because they know we were there to pay it. And now they paid the 5%. That's trillions of dollars. And we're not spending any money on that war, not 10 cents. We sell our equipment to NATO. NATO pays us for the equipment, and they give it to Ukraine or whoever they give it to. They can keep it. So I just want you to know we're selling equipment. Our people are buying equipment. They are buying the equipment at full price. And now I got it to 5, and I get along great with all of them. In fact, they call me the president of NATO. I said, I don't think so. But they're great. They're great people, and they're spending a lot of money, and a lot of money that they should have been spending in the past. But I think Putin was a wake-up call for them, really. We're now selling large quantities of American-made weapons to NATO, and we're getting really fair pricing. We're making a lot of money. Secretary Hegseth will soon be announcing major reforms to streamline military acquisitions and expedite foreign military sales. We have tremendous numbers of countries that want to buy our equipment, and in many cases it takes too long. They're backlogged. We're backlogged on all the equipment, which is something that's new to us a little bit. And I told those companies, you better get your ass going, because we're selling you a lot of equipment. We're getting countries to buy your equipment. You got to produce the equipment.
And this is exactly why the Trump administration has changed the name of the so-called Department of Defense back to the Department of War, which honestly is much more honest. The U.S. empire has always been based fundamentally on waging war all around the world. According to official U.S. government data, the U.S. military has carried out foreign interventions and operations in the majority of the countries on Earth. And in his speech, Trump actually complained about the fact that back in 1947, after World War II, the U.S. government changed the name. It was originally the Department of War. It later became the Department of Defense. Trump claimed that this was the first example of so-called wokeism.
And then we went, in a way, woke. That was probably the first sign of wokeness. And we changed it to defense instead of war. And I said, what do you think? How do you think if we changed it back? Would that be a nice idea? And Pete loved it immediately. The Secretary Hegseth beautifully described the name change reflects far more than the shift in branding. It's really a historic reassertion of our purpose and our identity and our pride. That's when we go with the word war.
Now, that quote is very revealing because the Trump administration loves to criticize identity politics, but this is another form of conservative identity politics. Trump right there, he boasted that the identity of the United States is war. And hey, he's right. This is the true face of the U.S. empire. The United States is a country that was founded on war, on stealing land from indigenous peoples who already live there, ethnically cleansing them, colonizing and stealing their land, and then waging nonstop war. For the entire history of the United States, it has been at nonstop war. This is the true identity of the U.S. And now, after the U.S. empire has waged war in dozens of countries around the world, it is bringing that war back home, which again, as I emphasized earlier, this is what every empire has done throughout history. After waging war abroad, those imperial wars eventually come home. And in his speech, Trump boasted that the Department of War, the U.S. warfighters, as Hegseth loves to call U.S. soldiers, they are now being ordered to attack people at home to maintain control for the government. Trump boasted about how he's deploying the National Guard to multiple U.S. states and how in particular he's targeting cities that are run by Democrats, his political opponents, and he boasted that he's ignoring the wishes of the elected leaders of these different cities and states. You know, these mayors and governors who are telling Trump, do not send the troops. We do not want the troops to be sent. And Trump says, I did it anyway. He's proud of it. This is the true authoritarian face of the US regime. It is not a democracy. It is an authoritarian police state and an empire that has waged war around the world, and that war is now coming back home. Listen to Trump's remarks here.
And they're brave in our inner cities, which we're going to be talking about, because it's a big part of war now. It's a big part of war. While America is under invasion from within, we're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within. We're stopping it very quickly. The horrible plague that's taking place from within. I just want to thank the National Guard in Washington, D.C. But it seems that the ones that are run by the radical left Democrats, what they've done to San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war, too. It's a war from within. And I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. How about Portland? Portland, Oregon, where it looks like a war zone. And I get a call from the liberal governor, sir, please don't come in. We don't need you. I said, well, unless they're playing false tapes, this looked like World War II. Your place is burning down. I mean, you must be kidding. Sir, we have it under control. I said, you don't have it under control, Governor. Oh, and we haven't even started yet. Last month, I signed an executive order to provide training for quick reaction force that can help quell civil disturbances. And this is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. It won't get out of control once you're involved at all.
So that was the President of the United States saying very clearly that the enemy is within, that the U.S. military is being deployed to attack the so-called enemy within the country. There's nothing democratic about this regime. And Trump, once again, took the mask off of the U.S. empire at the end of his speech, where he proudly compared the U.S. empire to the Roman Empire and to the British Empire, and also to Sparta. Listen here to Trump's concluding remarks. Again, he was speaking to the top generals who lead the U.S. military and proudly comparing the U.S. empire to the British Empire and the Roman Empire.
From Sparta to Rome, to the British Empire, to the United States of America, history has shown that military supremacy has never been simply a matter of money or manpower. At the end of the day, it is the culture, spirit of our military that truly sets us apart from any other nation. We will vanquish every danger and crush every threat to our freedom in every generation to come, because we will fight, 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 and we will win, win, win.
I think those comments truly speak for themselves. I don't need to add anything more. I've made my point. Trump has lifted the veil. He's taken the mask off and shown the true face of the U.S. empire. On that note, I'm going to conclude. I am Ben Norton. I'm the editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Please like and subscribe. Please share this. I will see you all next time.